Hey everyone, it's Flying Kraken here, and Nerfs are live as of recording. This is Friday. It's been 1 day since Nerfs and Buffs have been live. I've been playing it non-stop. I love the Nerfs and Buffs they gave. It's really changed up the format. We have a lot of room for new decks to appear and all that kind of stuff, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to be putting a lot of decks in here that I think are going to be front runners in the format. Some are going to be dark horses, some are returning decks, some are decks that got enough support, enough buffs to actually be a deck. But it's a lot of interesting stuff is happening. But a class that nothing happened to is Druid. They didn't do anything to Druid, no nerfs, no buffs. So how is Druid performing in the meta? My class. I played it for a couple hours yesterday, and I think it's performing just fine. I think the two main forms right now are Celestial and Ramp. Both forms of Ramp, but Celestial is more of a combo deck or whatever. And no real changes have happened with the deck outside. I've started playing Okanai in the deck. I think Okanai is a good way to counter specific turn cards and delay time for Druid to do what it wants. This format right now so far seems dedicated on decks having specific turns where it wants to play a power card that takes up all their mana a lot of times. So playing Okanai into that turn is really powerful. And in the form of Celestial, you can Celestial go off and have Okanai as your last minion on the board. Celestial back to 1 mana, and then what you basically whatever card you chose for them to counter, it will counter. They can't play any other cards, and you probably win the game from there if you weren't going to before. And Ramp, it's just to play on curve and to mess up opponents' turns. But if you don't like Okanai, you can always play Spammy or Kolak or whatever tech cards you want to play, Doomsayer, whatever you feel like you need to play in the deck. It's very flexible. It's a tech card slot. Not really much to say on Druid though. It's really powerful, and aggro Druid and Water Druid have some potential going forward, but right now I think Ramp Druid and Celestial Druid are king for the class. And yeah, that's about all we have for Druid. But before we move on to the next deck, I just want to thank all y'all for the love and support that y'all give the channel. And if you don't mind, if you hit that like button, bonk that subscribe button, and yeah, and we're just going to keep on producing content. But let's move on to the next deck. We're going to do basically decks that already exist, and then we're going to do decks that are up and coming. So let's move on to that. Next group of decks that I want to talk about a little bit are returning decks to the format. These are decks that just probably got better by the nature of the format changing, DH getting weakened, and or just really strong decks that are still strong as of right now that I think are very playable and very much leaders on the ladder at the moment. Those three decks are Ping Mage, Naga Ping Mage, to be more exact, Control Warrior, and Hand Buff Paladin. Now with Naga Mage, whether you play the ping version or the non-ping version, I think that this deck got a little bit of boost. It was already a fairly popular deck before, but I think the ping version in particular has gotten better post-nerf. It doesn't have to worry about aggro anymore. It has the better late game, I think, for decks like Control Warrior and Druid and all that kind of stuff, and Board Priest and all that kind of stuff, which Board Priest is probably not too much existent at the moment. But it's a deck that a lot of, it didn't really like the DH matchup a lot, and it just now can take its time with what it wants to do, set up more turns, push more damage, get more extra hero powers in, and all that kind of stuff. And as I said before, I think it's the better version versus Control Warrior, which might be the best deck on the ladder right now still, even with DH out of the format. And that brings up the next deck, Control Warrior. Control Warrior has not changed. A lot of people before the nerfs were like, well, DH is the reason why Control Warrior is really big, Well, Control Warrior is still very good. Now, the reason why I don't think they touch Control Warrior is because Control Warrior is a deck that people can build their decks around the format around to push it out a little bit more easy than Demon Hunter was. It's still very strong. You still can just control the board till you have the time to play Kazakus. You don't even need Kazakus a lot of the time. This version plays a Viper in there in case you run into some weapons. In particular, there is a weapon version of Control Warrior running around that I think is not superior to this version. A lot of people claim that it's better than this version. It pushes more face damage, but as I've seen, Just regular old controller is still better. You do a lot from the depths that get touched, so sometimes you push out turn 4 Nellies and turn 5 big cards, all that kind of stuff. You get double dips, you can get Nixie out really fast, all that kind of stuff. We've seen this deck enough times, though. You don't have to talk about it too much for to see its power level. And the third deck is the deck that we got top 500 with which is Hand Buff Paladin, with Warrior big in the format, and Druid being a popular deck, and all that kind of stuff. I think Hand Buff Paladin is still very good. Right now, it gets just as big as any other deck, and it's fairly aggressive, so you can push a lot of damage really fast. And there's many different versions. I still prefer the more proactive, aggressive version of this deck. I don't think sitting back on a bunch of value is the way you want to go with this deck. You can get them big enough, fast enough that you can just push enough damage to kill them with Smite in the end, and you do draw a fairly good amount of cards with this deck, more than you think you would. But yeah, those are the 3 decks that I think going forward are 3 returning decks outside of Druid that are returning and good. And if you already have the cards and were playing them before, you can keep on playing them. Now we're going to move on to some brand new decks. All right, finally let's talk about some brand new decks with buffs and nerfs coming. That means changes to the format, and these are the 3 decks that so far through one day of playing I think have the most potential to be players in the format. And while they're very, 2 very surprising decks, 1 not so surprising deck. The not so surprising deck is Thief Tempo Rogue. This is a deck that many remember Rogue ran the format for a little bit. They nerfed Null. Now they've unnerfed Null. Seeing if Secret Passage was the problem. Well, they also buffed the 3 mana damage spell to 2 mana. This deck has a lot of new life in it. It now has consistent turn 2 plays to get them a card from, a new card from their opponent's class to their hand. Null is back and stronger than ever. I do think the deck seems like a pretty fair deck, though. It doesn't seem like something that's too oppressing just yet. And it's actually pretty fun to play. All these decks that I have right here, all these new decks, are decks that I got from other people, so we're going to give them credit. This is Jay Alex's deck, the Rogue guy himself. This is the list that he ended up in, the 30 cards he ended up with at the end of his stream yesterday. And it seemed pretty solid. I played about 5 or 6 games, went 4-1 with it, I believe, and it was really strong. Beast Hunter felt really hard to beat, but other than that, it felt like I can beat any other deck in the format. But that was the least surprising of the decks. Really fun deck to play. Next deck is Quest Priest. This is a deck that, I'm sure you're saying is a meme. But honestly, I also went 4-1 and it turned into 7-2, and I just kept winning with this deck. This deck had so much potential. This deck is from Wicked Good. He posted it. He said, "You want a priest deck to try? Don't blame me if you lose some games." I played it, knew the risk, started winning games. I was like, "Look, Wicked, I'm winning all my games with this deck. I've only lost 2. I won 7 in a row, and this is top 500 legends, so it's not necessarily the low legend or anything like that." And yeah, I think the change to Whirlpool and the Colossal Minion for Priest was really good additions to the deck. It lets complete the deck, complete the quest a lot quicker, a lot more consistently without having to play weird cards. So being able to have 8 and 7 drops that you don't mind playing, being Mutanus and the Colossal Minion, and Whirlpool being 8, that's probably where it needs to be. And having plenty of draw and heal and removal. The only deck this deck really loses out to is probably Celestial Druid. You have a chance in every other matchup, I believe, unless it's some kind of weird combo deck. But even then, you can sometimes get there quicker than they can. And while that's a little bit unlikely sometimes, you can get there. It's very fun. It is slow, so if you don't like slow decks, don't play this deck. Don't try this deck out. And the last deck that we have here is Big Beast Hunter. Sorry, I had a little burp there. But Big Beast Hunter is really fun. This is the list I got from, it was a mixture between Sidisi and Pizza's list, and it was really fun. Hunter got a lot of buffs. The weapon got a buff. The Dredge Minion got a buff. And the 5 mana Pet Collector got a buff. So Hunter got a lot of buffs, and it really did. They really want to push something that wasn't Face Hunter. This is the deck you need to play. It's extremely fun. It's very consistent at getting big beasts out on the battlefield. It kind of just blocks a lot of decks. So there's a lot of decks that just can't beat this deck if you get things going. and it's worth trying on ladder. Now, I will say that out of all three of these decks, I think that Thief Rogue probably has the best chance to stick around, followed by Beast Hunter, followed by Quest Priest. Formats change day to day after nerfs, so this could be changed in a half a week, in a week, 2 weeks. Things can be different, but right now these decks seem really fun to play, and I hope y'all enjoy them. I will be putting the deck codes for all these lists down below in the description, and go follow all the people that I mentioned in this video: Wicked Good, Pizza, J Alex, Sadisi, all the people. Go follow me on my Twitch. We stream lots of fun decks all the time, and I hope to see y'all next video where maybe we are trying out one of these decks, get you some gameplay going. And happy diving, everybody.